get you. Okay. Try to get you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. For the benefit of any members of the public who may be watching now or later, could we just introduce ourselves? Could I start with the people at home? Rachel, can you start?
Hello, I'm Councillor Rachel Buckler and I'm a Councillor for Devorden Ward.
Thank you. Christopher Edwards?
Councillor Christopher Edwards for St King's Mark in Chepstow.
Jane?
Hi, Jane McKenna, ward member for Mitchell Troy and Trellock United Ward.
Thank you. And in the room?
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny Manager.
Sue Riley, Councillor for Bulwark and Thornwell and Chair of People Scrutiny.
John Crook, Councillor of Mega East and Andy and Vice Chair of this committee.
Sarah Birch, Councillor for Cantref Ward and Cabinet Member for Inclusive and Active Communities.
Rebecca Cresswell, Strategic Homeless Coordinator for Monmouthshire Council.
Morning, Ian Bakewell, Housing and Communities Manager.
Councillor Maria Stevens, Severn Ward, Caldicot.
Councillor Jackie Strong for Countycut Cross, I'm member of this committee.
Councillor Maureen Powell, Councillor for Pennyval Ward and Abergavenny and a member of this committee.
Jane Oates, Housing Options Manager for Monmouthshire Council.
Thank you. Okay, Jane, are you going to take... Rebecca, sorry. Are you going to go through the report? Sorry, Ian, you're going to do it. Thank you. Sorry, I should have asked if there are any declarations of interest. I'm sort of assuming not. No? Thank you. We have no members of the public in the open forum. And so we're now going to hear from the report of Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, and we will scrutinise that later. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Can you see the slides? Yeah. Right. Thank you for this morning. What is rapid rehousing? I'm going to read this bit because I think this is really important. Rapid rehousing is a housing-led approach, and we want to stress the housing bit for rehousing people that have experienced homeless, making sure that they reach a settled housing option as quickly as possible, rather than staying in temporary accommodation for too long. So the reduction of temporary accommodation is really key in this. Bit of background. Welsh Government's homeless strategy is essentially that homelessness should be rare, brief, and unrepeated. And rapid rehousing sits within that that context. And rapid rehousing is very much around a number of themes: homeless prevention, increase in access to good quality accommodation, and having tailored support that meets all needs. And part of the change in direction as well is that it's very much a client-focused approach, I think there was a feeling probably that homelessness services were the bare minimum, and it's very much about moving towards those services being tailored to the needs of individuals. And one key change that rapid rehousing is bringing in, again, I don't know how well known it was, but there was a challenge in terms of accommodating people with support needs, and it's still the case now. It's not uncommon for people who aren't considered to be tenant ready. They cannot get a property. But the concept of rapid rehousing is that any person should be able to access accommodation. And part of that change is there is a wider shift of attitude, and part of that is recognition that obviously we as a team welcome, is that homelessness cannot be resolved through housing services alone. You know, it needs the input of a wide range of agencies. So the current situation, some of this won't be new to you, but the current situation, the legacy essentially goes back to the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were, and it was for public health reasons, we were required to accommodate people to ensure there was no rough sleeping. So on the back of that, we suddenly had a massive spike in people going into temporary accommodation, and it really did throw out that hidden homelessness in Monmouthshire. And the key difference was that the result has been we had a lot of single males coming through. And at the moment, we've got 187 households in temporary accommodation, and I say a big proportion of those are single males. And the vast majority of people that we're supporting at the moment have got medium to high needs. And again, what that is highlighting is our lack of supported housing in Monmouthshire. So we've had a big expansion in the use of B&B because of our lack of temporary accommodation. That's not just the numbers of units that we require, but also the average time people are spending in B&B. And say the end of last year, the average stay in B&B was approximately 8.7 months. And I'm saying approximately because it's the basis for calculating that is from the time of a homeless application to getting social housing. So it's not quite reflective of what we want it to say, but it gives a feel. Obviously, 8 months for an average person is quite a lengthy period. Obviously, the expenditure that is incurring is significant for us, and is resulting in big budget deficit for us. And that is linked to the fact that we've got not enough social housing in Monmouthshire. The stock is very popular, and our turnover is low. And the private rented in Monmouthshire, again, as the committee will know, it's unaffordable. Again, it's generally good quality and popular, but the sector, we know from studies that we've done, couple of years ago that the sector has contracted, and the households that's impact. So those, the vulnerable households and those on a low income. And in terms of building new properties, again, phosphating the issue affecting north of the county, and that has put a hold on quite a number of affordable housing schemes that otherwise would have come through. So, what's our approach to rapid rehousing? So, the vision we've got is connected partnerships prevent homelessness, and if not possible, time in temporary accommodation is brief, facilitating well-being. And again, that as a vision was important to us as a team, because again, it to draw out the fact that rapid rehousing is a partnership approach. It's not about us solely as a team. And that vision was created by a steering group, a multi-agency steering group, and say key partners that we work with, including housing associations, health, planning, and I can't remember off the top of my head a few more, but who's that?
Health board.
Oh, health board and housing support providers. So that was the core. So very much our they make up our toolkit. And that steering group has come up with 4 priorities. One is to prevent homelessness at the earliest opportunity. Priority 2, increase the supply of affordable and settled accommodation. 3, provide timely and effective support to sustain accommodation. And 4, to maximise resources and benefits through well-connected partnerships. So again, nothing unusual with regards to that. And the plan that we've set out is a 5-year plan as required by Welsh Government. So what I wanted to do is just give you a feel of some of the priorities that we're working on, and and some of the we're not starting from a blank piece of paper, and give you a feel of some of the proposals that we're working to. So in terms of homeless prevention, I think it's important to recognise that this is a statutory responsibility, and in theory, that responsibility extends to the whole of the council. Again, it's not just about housing, and I think as a team, what I think probably the experience is that the majority of people that come through to the team present in a crisis. So it's too late when people come through. So what we want to get to the stage is that we are going upstream to identify, when people are starting to have problems. So we are getting a number of measures or procedures to try and enable us to look upstream a little bit more. So that's the broad concept of homeless prevention at the earliest opportunity. So some of the things that we've done, young people is a priority of the plan. So we've established an internal working group that is essentially trying to create a housing action plan for young people. Again, ourselves, social services, and certainly the youth service. So that's relatively new, but it's an active group that we've got working. And as I said, we've been looking to identify opportunities where we can identify risk of homelessness earlier. So Becky has been working with our housing benefit colleagues in respect of discretionary housing payments, because we're treating that now as a as a trigger for somebody that's struggling with managing their tenancy, and can we do anything to mitigate against that? And also, Becky's been talking to DWP. Again, people are going into job centres with issues, and there is a potential opportunity for them to, for that issue to be flagged up to the options team. We're also reviewing all our homeless information. To be honest, probably some of our homeless information is probably a little bit outdated. It's not inaccurate, but it's probably not as dynamic as we would like it to. But so giving the whole thing a refresh. And one of the particular things that we want to do is simplify some of the information that we have. It is quite a legalistic service. Parts of it we can't really get away from, but there are steps that we can take to make that more understandable. Again, like Becky's been working on different formats, and probably the use of videos, that particularly aimed at people perhaps with learning disabilities or younger people. So not in place yet, but that's a piece of work that we're doing. And also we're currently doing a service user survey. Again, to doing it through with support colleagues. Again, just really trying to get a better understanding of people's experience of using the service, and whether there's anything in any of the feedback that comes out, whether that will give us any indicators for improvements. So, second priority is increasing the supply of affordable and settled accommodation. The absolute priority, as you know, is to reduce the use of bed and breakfast. As of today, we've got 81 households in bed and breakfast spread across the county, and that's big for us. Pre-pandemic, we were probably talking about probably no more than 10, and that's only for a few weeks. So some of the things that we're looking to do and are doing, more social housing is going to homeless households, which is great for us as a team, but there are consequences on the back of that. So people waiting for a transfer will be waiting longer, and I'll call it your normal housing applicant will also be waiting longer. And we do know that the squeeze on some of those clients is challenging. Particularly when you know that there's people waiting for social housing for disability reasons, for example. But it's an ongoing conversation that we have, that Jane will have with housing association partners about vacancies. Pretty much on a daily basis. We want to maximise our social housing development. Again, nothing different to what it's been for since the year dot. Obviously, we've always needed to build more properties, but as I say, that's been undermined by phosphates at the moment, and there is a little bit of a sign that things could be improving, so we're hoping that perhaps this year there'll be a little bit of traction. And probably, I don't know whether it's filtered through, but we've been talking about the council purchasing accommodation for quite some time. We did get in a situation where if we bought a property, housing benefit wouldn't have been payable to clients going in because of the way the guidance was written, and that's taken us months and months to resolve that. But it's really good to actually come today and actually say that's a really big breakthrough that we've resolved, and there's staff out there actively now looking at properties. Jane went to look at a property last week, so we are. That's something we're pretty confident will build up a bit of momentum fairly quickly. And just to add in there that we will need, and again that's another conversation that's going on at the moment, when we buy a property, we've obviously got to make sure it's lettable and of a good standard. So we will need to refurbish it, and that's a conversation that we need to have quickly within the council in terms of how we're going to do that. Again, I hope you're all aware of our Monmouthshire Lettings approach now. Monmouthshire Lettings is it's branding. It's nothing more than that, just branding to trying to put it on a par with high street letting agencies. But that's a really important part of our homeless provision. Nearly all of our temporary accommodation is through private landlords. So we want to develop that. We want to develop the service, develop the products, make it more visible. So marketing is a real priority for us there. And again, Becky has been talking to our comms colleagues really about a campaign, and that I would like to see a similar visibility to the fostering campaign, because that was loud and regular and really professional. So I think if we could match that for Monmouthshire Lettings, that would be good. And again, just by way of a few examples, we have acquired a property that in Chepstow that we are using as young persons, dedicated young persons accommodation. Again, on the back of the lack of supported housing that we've got for young people, but that's something that Jane has set up very recently, and it's going very well with the Flamai support provider, isn't it? So just to give you a few photos. Again, some of these aren't brand new, but just going through them in clockwise, starting with the at 12 o'clock. That's our family accommodation in Caldecott, and that's provided by Monmouthshire Housing for us. Again, brilliant, great quality. The property on the right, 1 o'clock, is that's a relatively new property provided by a private landlord. That's a shared property, but superb quality. Really, really good. It was previously an Airbnb property, and the property at 5 o'clock. You could tell I was a bit short on photos because I had to put the stairs in. But again, just to give you a feel of quality, you can see from the stairs that it's not a bog standard staircase, but it's, I say, great property. 6 o'clock is our shared family accommodation in Caldecott, and that's provided by Monmouthshire Housing for us. And at 9 o'clock, that's their self-contained flats in Chepstow, provided by Mellin. So we're getting more and more good quality accommodation coming through, and it's brilliant, really good. Wrong way. So this slide is this is work in progress. Again, some of these aren't new slides to the committee, and it probably just shows how long some of this can take. But again, 12 o'clock. That's an internal photo of one of the properties that we've been looking to buy. So it's not ours at the moment. Whether we will get it, I don't know. But again, if we can bring that property through, again, that will be really important provision. That's in Abergavenny. 1 o'clock. Again, I've talked to you previously about using the council's assets. Again, it's not going as quickly as I like, but again, it's important work that's going on there to bring the top property into use. That needs refurbishing, and the other property is it's obviously is an old bungalow that's not being used, and we're looking to demolish that and come up with a new proposal with additional units on there. 5 o'clock. That is a scheme using modern methods of construction, as it's affectionately known. So it's not a traditionally built property. That actual scheme is in Bristol, and that scheme is using car parks. And because we've got such a shortage of land in Monmouthshire, we are going through the process of looking at car parks and whether there is, whether there isn't a scope to utilise those for accommodation. And as you can see, with that model, you don't lose car parking space, and that's obviously that's the valuable part of that. So we're doing some feasibility work on that, or colleagues in the States are. 6 o'clock, again, these are properties that are due to come through fairly shortly in Chepstow. Small, I think we'll call them starter type units, but lend themselves nicely for perhaps for somebody to come out of bed and breakfast, to have their own provision. There's a bathroom in that the other side of that door. So small, but again will be really important provision. And that particular scheme has been a good example of partnership working in the council, because we've been supported by planning colleagues in terms of granting planning permission for that, which is great. And then 7 o'clock, that is space above shops in Caldecott. So we're working with now we've got the ability to buy properties. We're in discussions with the owner there about the possibility of acquiring those. And then 11 o'clock, that's also Caldecott, and they're properties that Monmouthshire Housing have bought. And just to give you a feel of how long it's taken, that we're talking well over a year to have got to this stage. They've only just acquired it, but they're now focused on bringing those up to a standard. But that's the 6 units there, and that's again, it'll be really valuable provision for us. So moving on, housing support again is massively important for us in that, in the context of it, this can't be a housing only problem. We can provide the accommodation, but as a team, we're not able to provide the support for people should they need it. So at the point of the pandemic, our housing support colleagues did a lot of work to remodel to what we've got now, and that particularly included making sure that all of our bed and breakfasts, all of our shared housing were provided with support, and it was instant rather than having any delays. And some of the other achievements, the young person's accommodation I mentioned in Chepstow, that is being supported by MoYo, which again is a dedicated young person's housing support scheme. We've improved the facilities for Pobbles young person supported accommodation in Chepstow. Again, enabled them to refurbish properties and created self-contained units. And that's working very well. And that's a partnership that we've done with Children's Services. So that supports their priorities as well. Housing First is a housing support scheme that we introduced at the beginning of the pandemic. Again, that was something that wasn't in place, and that is allowing people with really high needs to have provision. That's again, it's worked very well. But as we sit here at the moment, that project now is at capacity, and Jane's probably got a little bit of a waiting list of people that ideally do need housing first accommodation, and probably stuck in bed and breakfast at the moment and unable to move on. And I keep talking about support needs. It's absolutely key that we understand the support needs of our clients at any one time. Something that we didn't do previously. So as part of rapid rehousing, we've done a number of assessments, but we need to get to the stage where we're doing it almost on a daily basis. So at any one time, we know what the profile of support needs is. And the biggie for housing support colleagues is the plan is for them to recommission the whole programme this year, and that will be really important, for homelessness. But that will be a big task. That'll be a big task for them during this year. And then lastly, as I said, we can't do this on our own. I've told you about the steering group that we established, which essentially supported the writing of the plan. But some of the other partnership arrangements we've got, the housing support colleagues operate a housing intervention panel, which meets to look at complex cases that we get stuck with, and being in a multidisciplinary setting. Again, it's a real opportunity to come up with joint solutions for individuals. As a team, we've been well supported by the council, because the change in homelessness did highlight our staffing what's the word? Fragile, I guess, probably is the best way to describe it. So we recruited an additional 8 people last year. We've since reviewed that, and we're due to take on five more. And I think we're nearly there now, aren't we? I think there's one left to recruit to, but that's been really important. Again, for Jane particularly from a management perspective, and dealing with that daily demand that's coming through. The next point is about data and about data and IT. We aren't where we are. We aren't where we want to be when it comes to data. Welsh Government's requirements for information is, well, they are data hungry, and we aren't where we want to be in terms of being able to produce that data. It's a bit, we're not doing it as efficiently as we would like to. And it's a real priority for us to get our IT systems operating as fully as we can. So basically, we're at the touch of a button. We can get that information that we need. We're a long way. Again, it's a lot better now than it was a year ago, but we've still got a little way to go. So that's occupying quite a bit of time for Jane at the moment. And one of those systems that we do need is a rent management software for our temporary accommodation. When we, at the point of stock transfer, we shared a rent system with Monmouthshire Housing Association, but due to GDPR, we've had to part company, and that left us without a system for rent management. So again, Becky, she's very busy at the moment. Becky is leading on getting us a new rent system. Maximise funding goes without saying. We're looking at every pot all the time, and so there's both capital and revenue are really important. They're just a few examples of pots that we're trying to utilise and maximise. And then just really by way of conclusion, these are some of the headline next steps. Say it's a daily job trying to reduce our use of bed and breakfast. Jane has a target of 10% reduced by the 1st of April. So I think if I remember rightly, that would need to bring us down to 76 in B&B to achieve that target. So we've got 81 at the moment, but it's so difficult because the team don't know who is going to come through and how many are going to come through in any one day. Could go a week of nobody, could go a week of 20, 30. So it's very, very difficult to project. We need to complete the staff restructuring. Jane's got a new member of staff starting tomorrow. So there's induction work for Jane to do there. But again, it will be a massive injection of resource for the option teams when that lady starts. I talked about the recommissioning that Housing Support Grant of Service colleagues have got to do. I say that's looming for them. And as I said, we need to. Now we're doing this. Now we're looking to buy properties. We've really got to get into the maintenance and refurbish arrangements. And I'm dead keen to get this campaign out to promote Monmouthshire lettings. And lastly, we need to get the steering group back together. Now now the plan's written. Now we're going through the process of getting it adopted. We now have to bring in our partner agencies to help us implement it. So, thank you very much.
Do you want to put your name in there?
Thank you for that. That's been really good and interesting. What is not puzzling me, but what I was surprised at was the number of, you say, young men that are homeless. Is it an age group, sort of around teenagers, 20-year-olds, or is it older?
It's generally younger people.
Yeah.
But it's probably worth Jane coming in there, because Jane will...
Yeah. Only I was so surprised to hear so many of them. And, you think, well, have they left home? Is there no room for them in their own home? Or do they not want to go back? Are they working or unemployed?
Most of them aren't working. There'll be a lot that are probably quite some distance from the workplace, but it's a complete mixed bag of reasons why people come in. Do you want to add?
You tend to think of homeless, you tend to think of families. In your back of your mind, you talk about homeless people, and I was so surprised when you said about that.
Yeah, just in addition to that, the reason why we have such a high proportion of single people, including males now, is partly because during the pandemic, our legislation changed.
Yeah.
So our priority need was kind of removed. So normally, pre-pandemic, single males perhaps wouldn't be seen as a priority, so we wouldn't necessarily have been housing them. With the suspension of that, obviously we've had to accommodate everybody under public health. So.
Yes. It's sad, but there we are, isn't it? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ian, for the presentation, and also to Rebecca and the team for all the work that you've done on the plan so far. I have got quite a few questions, so if you need to interrupt me at any time to pause, let me know. I notice, within your presentation you gave just now, you said that there should be a client-centred approach. But I was surprised to see in the report that you haven't consulted with the service users, although I do appreciate that some work is being undertaken at the moment with that, because I would have thought that the service users would be integral and at the heart of forming any plan. For example, on the governing bodies at schools, we have the school councils, and very often the pupils feed in and come up with some wonderful ideas. And there isn't any reason really why the service users in this case shouldn't come up with some great ideas as well and to help to form the plan. So how do you anticipate the service users' views will shape the plan, and will you utilise their data and feedback, and will this be included in the plan prior to it going to Cabinet? My next question is that I didn't see a great emphasis on empty homes within the report. When I was 17, I did some A-level coursework, which involved going down to the Big Issue office in Cardiff, where we met the manager. And we were really quite taken aback by one of the statements he said, which was homelessness can be eradicated overnight. And whilst I take on board, that it is a bigger thing than just the housing stock, as you've mentioned in your presentation, he basically said that the housing stock could be increased if empty homes were filled. I get it that it's not always quite so simple as that. But what are we doing to encourage second home owners or owners of empty homes to bring these houses back into housing stock? For example, are we providing grants to them to get them up to sort of suitable accommodation. I know in some local authorities they're talking about increasing council tax, but I personally believe that we should be encouraging these homeowners, not penalising them. And I know that you mentioned that the council is looking at purchasing accommodation. However, would it be more cost effective to provide grants to the houses that already exist, given that the average property price in Monmouthshire is 352,000, and that figure comes from January 2022. My next question is around, have the figures changed much? I guess it's always evolving. And for example, in Feb 2022, there was 90 in temporary housing accommodation. Are these trends likely to change? Since the report was written, we can all appreciate that over the last 12 months, an awful lot has happened within our economy. We've seen an increase in inflation, increased cost of living, increase in interest rates, rents, energy costs, which is obviously brought on by the Ukraine war. So have the predicted figures been stress tested, and are the performance targets and financial predictions still realistic given these huge changes in the economy over the last 12 months? My next question is, are there any local...
Jane, could you mind if I stop you at 3?
Yeah,
is that okay? Thank you. If we've got time at the end, maybe. Okay, thank you. Who's going to take the... Over to you, Ian.
Thank you for that. Starting with the client involvement, the reason that client views wasn't as part of the writing of the plan as we'd hoped was basically on the back of we had a bit of staff sickness in the middle of the drafting, so the plan that we had set out we weren't able to fully implement. We have done previous client surveys, quite basic, but ones that we did on one on the application process, one on the accommodation. So we had got some views that we were aware of, and I think the work that Becky's doing now will make that far more comprehensive. I don't think it will be available by the time we get to Cabinet, but this is very much an organic process, and I don't think there's any issues or worries about missing the boat. So there will be an opportunity to factor that into the development of the service as we're going along. Do you want to add from your perspective?
Yeah, so we're currently undertaking a survey of service users. So you can imagine it takes quite a considerable amount of time, simply logistically. Ideally, we would have, as Ian said, had that whilst we were completing the plan. But actually, one of the things that I've found, just from my perspective in doing it this way around, is that because we kind of consolidated on the data and we've had multi-agency meetings before drafting the survey, I find that we're probably asking better questions now that of our service users. So hopefully the answers that they give will have better impact than the kind of bog standard surveys that we've had in the past. So although it's not ideal, I do think that having had it delayed has kind of had some kind of benefit in that I think the answers that we'll get and the input that they'll have will be more useful in changing services going forward, because we know what the data is pointing us to want to ask.
Your query about empty homes, I think that's a point well made. Actually, and I probably should have reflected that in the presentation. But empty homes is I'll say probably getting a refresh at the moment. We do there is empty homes activity which was undertaken essentially on around a biannual basis, where we do contact members, every owner of an empty property, to ask them, what their plans for the property are, and we also follow up any complaints. But what we are doing at the moment, we are, as part of our restructuring and staff changes, we are moving empty homes from its current location into Jane's team, and empty homes will sit as part of Monmouthshire Lettings. One of the staff changes that we are looking to do is bring in another senior accommodation officer, and that post will have responsibility for empty homes, which actually means that we will actually be giving it additional staffing resource. So we'll have probably 1.5 people working on it now, as opposed to just one person. Your point about resources, we've got loans that we can use for empty properties. If somebody signs up to a long lease, they are entitled to a financial package, which does include a grant of up to £25,000, and there is a new national empty homes scheme which is being administered by RCT on behalf of Welsh Government, and again there is there's a grant of £25,000 available for that scheme. It's literally only setting up now as we speak, but I did see an email by coincidence this morning that we've had 2 applications already. So whether they're eligible or not, I don't know, but I thought that was that was good. Obviously, you might be aware, as part of the budget process, second homeowners, there's been a consultation exercise around council tax premium, and obviously I don't know the outcome of that, but that will obviously, whatever decision is there, will obviously link in with the strategy for empty homes.
If I may come in there, yes, we are proposing the empty homes premium, and I think we would propose to start so effectively on empty homes we're putting in more resources and more attention to them, and using both the carrot and potentially the stick. The stick being the council tax premium, and also potentially using the powers that the council does have to take over or potentially compulsorily purchase if all other things fail.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, whilst there are a lot of empty properties, there are a number of empty properties in Monmouthshire. It obviously goes into the hundreds. The experience is that a lot of those properties, the vast majority are in good condition. They're not a problem for the community, apart from being empty, and quite often get caught up in estates and probate, or being sold or whatever. So, but certainly with this change in resource will give us an ability to give it extra attention, and obviously we've got a few more tools that will, as you say, carrot and stick, which will make it easier to to get into conversation with people. Beg your pardon. So. Your last query was about figures and trends, and I think probably the best way of answering that is to say there's a little bit of unknowns really with the current position. Over the longer period, I would say that the number of people coming through the door hasn't massively changed since well before the pandemic. Seem to be around the 700 that are presenting in a typical year. Does go slightly up, does go slightly down. Obviously, the main change in those trends is the number of people that have needed accommodation, and as a team, we probably are bracing ourselves a little bit for the impact of cost of living. So, will inflation start impacting on the likes of rent arrears? Will interest rates start impacting on the on mortgage arrears? What I can say is we are better resourced now in the event of additional people coming through. We're due to take on a first contact officer who will receive applications coming through. That will free our housing options officers up to do more what we call higher value work. So ultimately we want them to do more prevention work, and sitting behind those options officers we have a number of homeless prevention officers who again their role is to get out and about and as it says on the tin, prevent homelessness and really help people look for that accommodation. So I think we're as well placed as I think as we could be, and obviously we've got a significant amount of more resource than we did, a few years ago. So I don't know. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jane, at all? No.
No, I don't think so. I think, like you said, just looking at the figures for the first couple of months of this year, we've had 154 homeless applications as of today. Reflecting back on 2022, it was 141, and back pre-COVID, it was 148 for the same period. So there has been a slight increase for this year. But it is fairly stable. It's just the nature of the people that are coming through and the immediacy of their homeless needs. We're seeing more families coming through. Landlords are selling up. Landlords are moving back into their own properties. So that's where we're losing out at the moment. And we've got a significant, more than I've seen in my 3.5 years of being in the council, larger families coming through. So we've got families of 3 or 4 children, we've 6 children, 5 children, and actually social housing in Monmouthshire doesn't necessarily cater for that size of family. So, we are, I think we do need to do some modelling. We do need to look back now over the past couple of years as to who has been coming through. But I think, there has been more presentations from families that we have seen before, although obviously single males are our priority group ongoing. So, yeah.
Sorry, can I just add to that? I've just suddenly thought of something else as well. You said about have we stress tested the figures? One of the things that we have been provided with is a toolkit by Welsh Government, which is quite involved, but that is a tool that enables us to enter our demand, enter the resources that we've got, and it's designed to support us with projections going forward. So it's not perfect at the moment, but it's certainly something though that we are using at the moment, and it's making us think differently as well.
Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian and Rebecca. Your report makes very interesting reading, and obviously it is a very important part of our council obligations. I'd like to just very quickly flag up something. 2 days ago, I took charge of a rescue dachshund, and I'm afraid the reason I'm not with you today is that it's very stressed, and you might get a lot of barking at any second. So apologies in advance. What I'd like to note is that obviously there are cost implications to the council in this new initiative, and one of the things you've said is that you've employed several more people and more people are being recruited. Can you illuminate us in what areas you have, touched on a couple of people that are coming in, and what responsibilities are seeing as being expanded? It's sort of, it strikes me that the residents of Monmouthshire should know what the implications are for their council tax. I take your point that it is difficult to see what's happening at the moment because these figures that we're looking at are by nature retrospective, and it would be very good to know the position now in more clarity. Now, the report mentions caravans. This is particularly a rural question, really, and I represent a rural ward, being classed as a form of homelessness. Now, historically, caravans have been seen as a way of housing people in rural areas, particularly, and which are council tax. Can you please explain what basis a caravan is liable for council tax and therefore considered housing stock? It would also be very useful to know how many empty houses there are in Monmouthshire. It's not simple to say that empty houses are ready for rent to homeless people with no cost or logistical problems. What's the implication to the council if you start appropriating or demanding empty houses? They will be in various states of repair, and that leads me on to enable private housing to be ready for rent. There have been significant changes brought in by the Welsh Government for rental properties, which has meant that increased stock is now being put up for sale, as the costs involved can be enormous. What are we doing to enable more properties to be put up for rent? It's not feasible that owners will necessarily be able to afford paying older properties. In particular, there are all sorts of dilemmas with old cottages, etc. And but you've mentioned grants, but I'd like to see more evidence of what is available and how actually helpful it would be. And it buys, are we going down a rabbit hole that will only produce 1 or 2 properties a year, for instance? The last thing, have there been negative attitudes detected by local residents if homeless people are seen to be jumping the queue, and what can be done to mitigate it? Are there any groups that cause more negative responses than others? I'm particularly thinking of single males being put into accommodation. Are people locally thinking, why is that fair? And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that. Thank you. And no dachshund barking, so that we're ahead of the game. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The caravan situation and I'm looking at Jane here, but if I recall correctly, Welsh Government don't allow us to use caravans for homeless purposes. That's right, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it's to do with the square footage in terms of allowing the use of it for homeless persons. I mean, yeah, we had tried during COVID to accommodate a number of people into caravans, but the Welsh Government were very unhappy with that and weren't supportive of us doing that. So yeah,
Yeah, I think because the emphasis on the Welsh Government's approach to homelessness is about good quality accommodation, not shared accommodation. I was going to say no night shelters. And so I was correct that they won't let us use caravans. So it's not really a bit beyond the emergency scenarios, crisis situations we had a couple of years ago. We've not really looked at caravans at all. So and you query about council tax, I couldn't answer that. We've not been involved with council tax at all, but I can find out for you if that's helpful. Your question about empty homes. As I sit here at the moment, I couldn't tell you what the number. I've got in my head. I've got a feeling it's around 400. But again, I can quite easily can confirm the numbers for you. Your point about bringing empty homes back and the difference it will make, I think, is a really good point, because a successful attempt to bring an empty property back into use is not necessarily going to align with homelessness or social housing. The reality is it's probably going to be result in either the owner moving in or the owner selling or whatever. So, I mean, our approach to our approach to empty homes is to promote all of the options. So, so it could be buying, it could be renting. Sorry, it could be selling, could be renting, could be us taking it on to lease, could be doing something with the housing association. So no idea is off the table, and obviously we've now got, as I said earlier, we've got a better package to help people if there are instances of a disrepair in condition. But your point about will empty homes impact on provision for homelessness or social housing? I would sit here and say it's probably going to be limited. That would be my guess. But we'll see as we work through it. Your point about enabling properties to be put up for rent, that is the whole concept of Monmouthshire Lettings. We're inviting people to contact Monmouthshire Lettings to get support with renting, and I believe that approach is working. We offer it's a free service, and we offer any assistance with regards that property being rented, and it could be handing it over to us. That's what a lot of landlords like doing, but we're also providing management support to landlords who continue being the landlord, but we're helping in the background. And the message that we want to get out with Monmouthshire Lettings is, we can offer a bespoke service, and we want to support and encourage people to let. So we've got a package, but would welcome any queries, that supports a prospective or actual landlord. So, and we've got a dedicated member of staff that deals with that. And then your last question about the attitude of the local community. Again, I think that is highly relevant in terms of this discussion. Housing needs in Monmouthshire, in the broadest sense, are high. There's a lot of people waiting for accommodation. We've obviously got, several thousand on the waiting list that are waiting for social housing. And we know that there are a number of people there at the moment are in real need, and it's difficult for us to help at the moment. So that's one side. The other side of things, again, that we're very mindful of in terms of our accommodation provision, is we don't want that to impact on the local community, and we try to be careful in terms of the accommodation that we acquire. We try to be careful with the how we place people. And we have packages of management and support to try and mitigate against any risk. And unfortunately, on occasions, we do have situations. It's also an issue for the housing associations as well. They've got a responsibility to their tenants. They obviously want to provide a good quality service, and again, in terms of providing that service, they're very mindful of changes in community profile. So, did you want to say anything back at all? Or? No?
Not massively. I was just going to say about the kind of priority. I think there was, just for clarity, about the single males and the responses to them being housed. I would say, if anything, it's kind of the opposite, because prior to the suspension of priority need, a lot of the single males wouldn't have been accommodated, and that would have been seen as unfair by the community, I would imagine, quite significantly. It's now not a case that they're being prioritised, it's just over anyone else. It's just that we now have a duty to them that we perhaps wouldn't have had previously. So they're not being housed at the expense of other people. It's just that our duty to accommodate them we now have, whereas perhaps we wouldn't have done before.
I just like to add what communities are more averse to is the use of direct lets. When they see a property that is not advertised on Home Search, but then suddenly there's somebody in that property, that brings more negative comments to how's it, going through the banding system. Obviously, homeless households sit in band 1 along with a number of other categories of vulnerable people. So they sit within that band 1 there. And I think we're hitting probably about 60% allocations to homelessness at the moment. So there still is quite a good mix there. But direct lets are the ones that cause the main issues. So we do try to keep direct lets to a minimum for extreme circumstances. So that kind of works quite well, really, because that, like I said, and I think within the Home Search literature now, there is a section that will explain, the number of direct lets that are made across the community, maybe a vague reason as to why that may have happened. So that's where the uproar normally comes from, is there's an empty property that has not been advertised on Home Search. So that's probably more than what we would get in terms of homeless allocation.
Could I ask you, not now, Ian, but if you could clarify at a later date, because I think you mentioned 100 empty houses, but at performance and overview yesterday, it was basically said there were 400 empty houses. So, not now, but if you could just check that figure, that'd be lovely. Thank you very much. Are we, Councillor Stevens? Thank you.
Sorry, could I just ask? I would like my first point, which was the cost implications to the council, and who's being, not who obviously, but number of people being employed in the homelessness section. It would be really useful for us to know, what officers you're proposing and are employing, so that we know the sort of breadth of the people being employed. So if you could let us know that, not now, but it would be a good thing to know.
What I can do, I can circulate staff structure, and that highlights the new posts.
I think there is a staff structure in the report, but perhaps we can provide more detail about what is directly funded through Monmouthshire and what is funded as well through Welsh Government grant.
Okay, are you okay, Councillor Buckler, with that?
Yes, thank you. That's great. What our Councillor Birch said would be excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian, and rest of the team for a very comprehensive report. Just a couple of brief things. It mentions prevention work for homeless. How will prevention work? How will that entail in? How do you approach the reasons why people become homeless? You know, that must be a massive job, and how will it be implemented? And I noticed on the report as well, existing housing stock, there's no Caldecott listings. Abergavenny, Monmouth and Chepstow are on the listing, but nothing at all for Caldecott. And also we haven't mentioned anything about HMOs. I'd like to know a little bit more about the HMOs, certainly within Caldecott, if you're able, but certainly around Monmouthshire. In recent years, I've had lots of issues with residents concerned about their HMOs, being their neighbours and so on. So we haven't touched on HMOs at all. So if you could enlighten us on that, please. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure about the accommodation listing. If we could perhaps...
Ian, I think the report actually mentions Chepstow, Abergavenny and Monmouth, but I don't know whether mentioning Chepstow you mean Sevenside, so it's not actually clear in the report, and I think that's probably, I think there are individual units mentioned in Caldecott, but I think it's the overall sort of report. It's not clear.
Yeah, we'll check that, because certainly there's accommodation in Caldecott as well as Chepstow. I'll take the HMO question, and then I'll perhaps look at Jane in terms of the prevention query. But HMOs at the moment are a really important part of our provision at the moment. If we I think we've probably got approaching 90 units spread across a number of properties. Again, spread across the county. If we didn't have those HMOs, that would be a real loss of provision. We do accept that there are management challenges, more management challenges with HMO accommodation. But I will say that we have done it we have had HMOs now for I can't remember when we took the first ones on, but probably 5, 6, 7 years. So we are quite experienced at managing HMOs. The ideal scenario is we wouldn't have any. I think we do buy into the Welsh Government's argument about good quality accommodation and the importance of self-contained accommodation. But as we sit here at the moment, I am of the view that we are a long way off from having that ideal portfolio of accommodation self-contained accommodation that would enable us to reduce the use of HMOs. So I think we need, as a council, need to continue with HMOs, certainly in the short to medium term. What Jane and I have had is some of the HMOs that we took on in the early days, shall we say. I think we would like to probably replace some of those, and we'd probably approach it slightly differently to probably what we did a few years ago. And I think as we're taking on new accommodation, that will enable us to have those conversations about whether we do start shedding some of our older stock. But I say, as we sit here at the moment, we're just not able to do that because of the reliance on B&B. So.
May I chip in here? I think we have to be very mindful of the impacts of decisions made with regards to welfare benefits at Westminster, and the lack of the way in which the amount that people can claim towards their housing costs has failed to rise in line with actual housing costs. So for anybody who is single and under 35, the only thing they will be able to claim, unless they're in accommodation that we have put them in, the only thing that they will be able to claim is the shared room rate, which is actually below what you would be paying for a house in a multiple occupation block or in Monmouthshire. And if they're a family in rented accommodation, the amount that they can claim towards the cost of that rent is significantly below what they would, be renting for even the most modest semi or terrace. So that is having a great impact on us, and we have to be mindful of that in terms of our policy making. That whilst government has the aspiration that everybody should be in self-contained accommodation, the rates set in Westminster for the DWB don't in many cases support that.
I was going to say, so in terms of prevention, I think we can look at prevention, homeless prevention in two ways really. Within the local authority, we've got a housing support service that will work with people who are struggling within their tenancies, with mortgages, within private rented or homeowners. So we've got that service within the local authority where we commission third sector organisations to work with people such as Pobl, Mind, Llamai. We'll all work in the community to try and prevent people falling into the realms of homelessness. As a local authority, as all local authorities have a statutory duty to prevent homelessness. So if a household approaches the local authority at risk of homelessness, it used to be within the 56 days, and that is still the legal kind of requirement for us to work with somebody. But as a local authority, with our prevention officers in place now, we will take people on that are presenting to us 3-4 months in advance of their homeless date. So we've got numerous packages that we can offer people in terms of homeless prevention. So it may be that we can negotiate, a rent change with the landlords. We can look at financial packages for people who are able to afford to move into other private renters, such as we can go as rent guarantee. We can, pay the bonds. We can pay, an extended rent in advance for people. With younger people, there's a family mediation service, because obviously the safest place for people to be is at home. If it the best place for them to be is at home, if it's safe for them to remain there. So obviously we've got the prevention, the mediation service that will come in to support those families, and then ongoing support then to help them remain there. I think we've got quite a proactive prevention team. They're very good. They've got some excellent negotiating skills in terms of, where often landlords will be looking to go to court to remove people from properties, we are able to negotiate with the landlords to help those people remain at the property rather than coming to temporary accommodation. So we will pay the landlord possibly an extra, package of a financial package to help them remain in that property till social housing comes, they come up for social housing, which is something that maybe without the financial packages that have been available from Welsh Government, we wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So we are able to kind of prevent people coming into temporary accommodation by helping them to remain in the property that they're essentially being evicted from, by having that good relationship with the landlord. So I think that's something that when we speak about how the restructure of the team, the prevention officers have been pivotal in being quite innovative in stopping people coming through to temporary accommodation, because obviously the best place for people to be is still remaining at home until they do need to leave and come into social housing. So is there anything in particular that you'd thought about in terms of prevention?
No, just in general. Thank you very much for your very detailed explanation. Thank you.
If you need anything else, though, just contact me directly. I can do that for you.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So around the Caldecott, were you referring to the housing market areas listed in the report?
On page 19. Page 19.
So I think it...
2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, 2 and 3. I think it's to do with the LHMA, and Caldecott is included in the Chepstow area. But I can get you a map of how they're separated.
Oh,
I think that was really not very clear for us on 7 sides.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll see what we can get for you guys.
Thank you. Councillor Strong.
Okay, thank you, and thanks Ian and the team. I think it's been really useful, not just the report, but having the presentation as well. I just wanted to make a couple of points. Really sort of welcome Welsh Government's aim to make homelessness rare, brief and unrepeated. I wondered how many people are coming through during crisis on, more than one occasion, how many sort of families and individuals that might be. I also wanted to make some comments on the integrated impact assessment document and ask whether, because one of the sort of cohorts that is mentioned in the report are people that are ex-forces, and whether that might actually be included in the impact assessment, as to, because we are championing that within Monmouthshire County Council, whether we ought to make it a bit more robust so that we can see that, they are on our radar and that we will support them if they are at risk of homelessness. Okay. What else did I? The Monmouthshire Letting Service, and I know that it's your aim to make it more visible, but can I just suggest that it's done in a sensitive way? We wouldn't want to make it so visible that it might actually be stigmatising, so that you're kind of, sort of big sort of flashy light as to what properties are being used for homeless people. I think it's about it being more generic and a sort of positive thing. So that was just a comment that I wanted to make. There are quite a few empty properties around Caldecott that I'm not sure you're aware of, or if you are, what's happening with them. And I wonder whether I can sort of contact you afterwards just for some updates. And there's a couple of places in Roggett that I've seen as well. So yeah, the figure of 81, is that individuals altogether, or is that families and single people?
Yeah, we work in households.
Households. Okay, no,
yeah.
there's more than that 81. Yeah, that's useful. I take on board the different, the statutory duty for sort of single people. When you talk about young people, is that 18 to 25 or 16 to 25? Okay, that's quite useful as well. And I think it's really important that we are talking about self-contained units within sort of properties, because just thinking, you know, as an ex-social worker, how vulnerable some of these people are. And if you're housing a lot of people with very complex needs and support needs, that, you know, it's not just the people with the high needs, it's people that maybe are forgotten because they're sort of, you know, feeling vulnerable and isolated away from their sort of networks, really. So that's, and can I just say, I really do welcome the fact that your team is expanding. We see in Caldicott we've had a number of homeless people. We had one guy that was sleeping on the cricket field for quite a number of months during the pandemic, and it's really crucial that there is that support network. Are those people that you're taking on, are they patch based, or are they more of a generic thing across Monmouthshire? I think I've asked a lot of questions, so sorry. Thanks.
But just going backwards, the staff that we have taken on, and it's been a bit of a mixture, really. So the majority of the changes last year were accommodation, because our accommodation portfolio grew. And when I say grow, I include bed and breakfast in there, because we didn't really have a presence in bed and breakfast. So some of Jane's staff now spend time in the B&Bs, you know, to you know, not just help the applicants but support the proprietors as well. So that was one group of staff. Also linked to accommodation was that we get people coming through on a daily basis. So we could get somebody now saying they're homeless and they need accommodation now. So we've got a member of staff that provides an accommodation duty role, and that's literally what they do every day. They're placing people and assisting with transport and storage and whatnot. So that was a new post, and but what we found is we needed two, because it was a high pressure role.
It's a high burnout role. We want to preserve the staff that we've got. We want to preserve the staff that have got the skills and the experience to be able to do the work that we need to do. And duty accommodation is full on every day with placements, and it's almost like a game of chess, trying to move people around that may be causing us issues and trying to make everything work. So it's not just the people that are coming through, it's the moves that we need to make to ensure that everybody stays accommodated, because the pressure for Welsh Government still is that, you know, a new priority need since October, I'm going off a bit off kilter, but bear with me, is that a new priority need is now rough sleeping where it wasn't before. So if we have people falling out of accommodation, their priority need, they can still present to us again as a priority need for rough sleeping. So what we want to do is prevent them coming through the system again and starting from the off again. So it's about, you know, the duty accommodation officer, along with the accommodation officer, you know, we do have to sometimes move people around to try and make those properties and those bed and breakfast work, and those relationships within the bed and breakfast as well. But that kind of has taken you off point there, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we expanded the accommodation team, obviously brought in another duty accommodation officer to try and lower the burnout rate for those members of staff. Obviously, in the prevention team is something that we've expanded. The housing options officer team, you know, outside of COVID would have a fairly high caseload of about 30 or 40 cases each. They're now at 150 to 200 as case officers. So bringing in a first contact officer to take them off duty so they can actually concentrate on the caseloads, and any of the prevention work that is coming through from the housing options officers goes to the prevention officers to do. So they are there with their core homeless cases. The cases are big because people are not moving on from the temporary accommodation. So we've got a lot of their, so we've got, you know, 81 households. It works out at about 180 households across all of the accommodation. So they're just sat as homeless households with the case officers as well. So because there's not that move on, the cases just keep expanding. So we've got the prevention officers that are doing the faster work, while the housing options officers are sat with the higher caseloads, but and we will be taking them off duty, and we are bringing in a senior options officer to support them more fully than we have been able to in recent years.
Can I just add a point? Working in collaboration, which is so crucial to all of this, takes time as well, doesn't it? You know, if you're just working as a lone worker and doing all this stuff, it could be quicker. However, if you are collaborating with health colleagues, social services, the young people's youth service or whatever, it all takes time and energy. But it's actually crucial that you actually make those decisions that are client-based. Can I just add Chair? Can I just add one thing? We talked about feedback, and actually, have you had feedback from the people that you've moved on? What their experience of homelessness and how they've been supported through that journey?
Yeah, I mean, we're not as good as we could be with that. We do hold events where we do have we have events at the accommodation where we will ask for customer feedback. It's something I think, and I know it's not an excuse, but when we've got more time and I can just sit back and look at our processes in a little bit more detail, it will be something that. Customer feedback is something that was there pre-COVID. It was something that was that the officers would ask. We did have the customer feedback forms, but it is something that's kind of slightly gone off because we're just so busy. So again, it's just that being able to sit back, have a look at what processes we need to bring back in, and with our new members of staff in place, customer feedback will be part of what their roles are, but it's just having the capacity within the team to be able to deliver those processes, really.
Thank you.
Okay, I can see we're running a little bit short of time. I know Councillor Crook has got 2 questions. I've got 1 and a bit. And I know that Councillor McKenna wants to come in with one final one, which I think is going to be very useful. So, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Ian, and commendable to your team, really. Recently, I spent some time with the local hubs and the libraries, certainly on the budget consultation, and I had really good discussions with them, and I just wondered, and probably you are, but quite clearly they told me that they would be able to pick up issues of homelessness and people having problems as they are visiting the hubs. And I just wondered whether one of your priorities could be a closer connection with that department, really.
Yeah, we, again, this is a conversation Jane and I have regularly. When we remodeled the team's delivery a number of years ago, way before the pandemic, and essentially contact for homelessness has become largely over the phone, and people do go into the hubs. And they are assisted in the hubs. They can get a bit of advice in the hubs, and then they are then passed through by telephone to Jane's team. And whilst it's not 100% telephone, we can and we will do visits. We can meet people at the hubs. And I say it happens occasionally, but Jane and I were of the view that there's too much by the telephone, isn't there? And so that is something we are trying to change at the moment. And I think Jane's mentioned the first contact officer. Again, the idea is that will take the options officers off duty. And then we'll free them up to be able to go out and about more. I know Councillor Buckler hopefully had a visit did a joint visit with one of the team a few days ago. So we want to do more of that. And I think it's a point well made. We can't deliver the optimum service if it's all over the telephone. Some people have got very difficult circumstances, and etc.
Yeah, so. I just took it up your question about risk earlier assessment, and obviously that is the answer, isn't it? That we pick this up very, very early, and I just realised that those hubs could pick up things that maybe are not really out in the open, as it were. They sense what the problems are within the families because they're having a cup of tea there, or there's an issue or something similar. So it would be great to make this earlier risk assessment, really. And the other question I had was that, take it the right way, please, because I think it's so wonderful that we are providing a high quality of properties, but maybe we could work quicker and obtain more properties if we had a lower standard but fit for purpose. And that bothers me really with the costs that we're involved with. I see very high standards, but maybe that's not what we actually want, which is fit for purpose going forward.
What we need to do and haven't done, we need to agree a standard of MCC homeless accommodation, and the accommodation that we are aspiring to take on is we're aspiring to take on better quality accommodation in the general sense of the word, and I think we are achieving that. Some of the accommodation is probably it's probably more luck, really, rather than strategic intent. You know, we're setting out to provide better quality accommodation with higher standards, and some of the accommodation that has come along, has probably been higher than you would normally expect. But I think it's important that we agree what is a good standard or the appropriate standard for Monmouthshire. So we're providing consistency, and particularly as we're starting to buy. So what standard of kitchen do we want? What standard of bathroom? Do we have mobility standards, etc., etc. And there's obviously implications with that, because some of you want accommodation that's fairly durable, and equally you want accommodation that's that we class as that someone can class as a home. So there's a few considerations to do, and it's a piece of work that we need to do, but haven't done it.
It's just a thought that we have a typical standard for a normal family. We could provide more and at a quicker pace, really.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. If I could just have a brief one here, really. I wanted to ask, and I don't really want to turn this into a half-day speech, but given that the demography of the people who are presenting, as I see them as being the unluckiest, probably the saddest, or in some cases angriest, and in my ward, probably the most unwell people, what are the implications for the Monmouthshire residents of not supporting these people?
Well, I think the issue is the implications are you're setting up people to fail, and equally we, in terms of Welsh Government and the expectations, we wouldn't be meeting our responsibilities. I think again, conversation Jane and I regularly have, we had. We'll call it the council's homeless service in the olden days. I think that was very much tied in with the legislation at the time. It was very much a safety net, but it was minimalist. And as Becky's talked about priority need, it didn't cover everybody. So we got into many a decision. Or many conversations with support workers and even solicitors about have we made the right, correct, legal decision. But the service was just simplistically, it was accommodation, and the support, the wraparound support, it did start to come in with supporting people, but it's come on leaps and bounds since the pandemic. But I think with the old system was, we had a duty, we met the duty, and moved on. And what we didn't offer, or very rarely, was second, third, fourth chances. The service now is very much about second and third chances, it does affect the way that we work, and that's why you will place somebody. Perhaps doesn't go as well as we'd have hoped, and we need to move, or will move people to try and help them. And obviously, what we don't want to do is end up with evicting people and ending up with more of sleeping, basically.
So, in that implication, have we got rid of the intentionally homeless category of eviction, or not providing for people?
Intentionality is still there, but it's slightly lower. It's a lower consideration than it has been since the legislation came in, really. So we do have people that are in accommodation that are intentionally homeless, but we don't. Prior to COVID, if you were found intentionally homeless through your Section 73 assessment, then you'd be asked to leave the accommodation. But then people then are at risk of rough sleeping. So it's a perpetual hamster wheel that we're on at the moment. So we do have people that are in accommodation that are intentionally homeless. It may affect their banding. It may mean that they're excluded from home search, but we are in a position where we need to find them move on accommodation, and we are not unusual across Welsh local authorities having lots of people in accommodation that don't necessarily have a priority. I think most of ours do have a priority, but their needs are complex, and it's about what the most appropriate move on accommodation is for them, especially when they have been excluded from home search. So,
thank you. Councillor McKenna, your final and brief question, please.
Yeah, thanks. I've actually got a couple, so if you can't answer them or need to answer them quickly, then no worries. So firstly, are there any local authorities in Wales or UK-wide whose best practice can be followed? Within the report, there was a brief mention of Scotland, but no expansion on this. How do we compare to other local authorities in the Gwent partnership with regards to targets, figures, funding, staff in housing stock, use of B&B, etc.? I'm assuming it's sort of Wales-wide, but just wanted a quick clarity on that. Within the figures, are Ukrainian refugees included? And also, you briefly mentioned about HMOs. Are there any plans for establishing hostels within the county? For example, buying up or utilising empty pubs, empty halls, old schools, etc. Because these are often quite large and can therefore accommodate quite a number of people. Thank you.
Your question about best practice, very, very much we do look to use best practice. Scotland was referred to in the report because Welsh Government copied or adopted Scottish practice in terms of rapid rehousing. So certainly we have we've used some of the practice that Scotland has used. But I will say that I think whilst rapid rehousing came in first for Scotland, some of the practices that we've had in place for a few years, Scotland are actually behind us. But Jane works very closely with the Gwent local authorities. Becky, in her role, there's there's a Becky in each of the other local authorities as well. So Becky will be coming together with her counterparts. Yeah, nothing's off the table in terms of learning from other people. How do we compare with other local authorities? It's probably quite difficult to make direct comparisons because we are also different, but there are a lot of similarities, aren't they? There's a lot of other local authorities that are, struggling with B&B. We talked about phosphates earlier. There's some other authorities that are affected by phosphates. I would say that we're probably more disadvantaged when it comes to private rented. Rents in Monmouthshire are really high, very buoyant sector that can use professionals, etc. So, and I think some of the Councillor Strong made the point about almost discriminating. It's very difficult. Any provision that we provide, it's very difficult to make it subtle. Obviously, we want it to blend in. We want it to be part of the community, but that isn't easy because our communities and towns are so small. So, but yeah, it's very mixed bag. You queried about Ukrainians. Any Ukrainian that presents as homeless, Ukrainians are able to present as homeless and they've got the right to go on the housing register. So Ukrainians that have presented as homeless are included in the figures. There's not that many, is there, at the moment?
Currently, you've got 11 households. Yeah.
And then your point about hostels, when there's no plans to create any hostels. That's not something that we want to do. The focus really now is on supported housing schemes, which is probably the closest that we would come. And as I said earlier, we do see HMOs as being part of the landscape going forward, but I certainly wouldn't class those as hostels. And those HMOs we want to be on the smaller side, rather than big ones. And your point about other buildings, again, absolutely. If there are buildings out there that can be repurposed, absolutely nothing is off limits. And certainly, I know that colleagues in the States we're working with them again, looking at repurposing or potentially repurposing, existing council buildings. So, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. If everybody's happy with that, I'm going to very, very briefly sum up. In fact, I'm not going to sum up very much at all. There's obviously enthusiasm for this scheme. It's quite evident. I'm wondering, do you think you could come back in 9 months' time to update us? Because it's been really interesting and it's been an issue for so long within Monmouthshire. And I wondered if by then we might have some agreements on the standards, because that's obviously had some interest as well. Would that be okay? Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, everybody. Good job we didn't have 3 reports. Sorry, and yes, now we're going to go through the forward work programme and the action list. And I'm going to hand over to Hazel for that.
Chair, the action list is there for members to note and see progress out of your meetings, to make sure that I follow up on things that you have asked for, and we'll be including certain things that you've asked for from today after this meeting. One thing to note in terms of your forward work programme is that we had 2 items scheduled for today which weren't ready to bring to you. That was the corporate parenting strategy and also a report on respite. respite provision. So we've tentatively put those in for later early summer. But the other main item for you to be aware of is that the review of the My Day, My Life, that was scheduled to come to us in April, but that's now going to be more likely to be June. There isn't a delay in the actual report coming from the providers of the consultation process, but it's just to give Cabinet enough time to be able to consider the findings of the review and then to draft any proposals that they would want to bring to you. It's too rushed to bring to you in early April, given that agenda dispatch requires papers to be out at least sort of a week in advance of that. So just for you to note really the work programme, and then obviously the Cabinet and Council forward planner is updated and emailed to all members. If there's anything in there that you see that you would like to bring forward for scrutiny, then please let the Chair and myself know.
Hey, so you'll amend those dates that are actually on the plan at the moment?
Those are changes that have come forward through to me since the agenda dispatch. Okay. So yes, particularly the Tudor Street one, for you to note that. It's not Tudor Street, sorry, it's My Day, My Life, but obviously a lot of people are contacting us with interest in coming to that meeting, public participation. So whilst it wasn't set in stone that it was coming on the 18th of April, that's when we kind of had provisionally factored it in, but it will be later. And also just to explain with the corporate parenting and the respite provision reports, those are also due to come later than originally anticipated. Okay.
Okay, can we have could somebody help me with moving these 3 lots of minutes forward? For the November minutes? Yeah. Okay. And the January minute? 3rd of January?
26.
Yeah. And the 26th of January minutes, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. Like I say again, I'm glad it was just one report. And we'll see you, the next meeting is in April.
Yes.
18th of April. Thank you.